People get confused about the word alopecia in general. Alopecia by itself means hair loss. And alopecia areata, as I said, is an autoimmune disease.
Welcome to That's Derm Good. I'm Janelle Ball, and I'm excited to bring you thought-provoking conversations about biologics, specialty medications, treatments, and so much more. I'll be chatting with some amazing guests about access, affordability, and advocacy. You're really going to enjoy this show. This episode is sponsored by Dermavant. Welcome to That's Derm Good. Today, my guest is Lisa Anderson, PhD, Senior Director of Research for the National Alopecia Areata Foundation. Welcome, Lisa. Thank you for joining me.
Hi, Janelle. Thank you for the invitation. I'm happy to be here.
Yes, I am excited to chat with you. So we met at the PAMS conference, the Patient Access Management Summit. So tell me a little bit about your background and how you even came to finding out about the PAMS conference and why you were there. But I definitely want to hear more about your research in that role.
Sure. Yeah, it's kind of a little bit of a long story of how I ended up at the PAMS conference. I will tell you a little bit about me and how I ended up at the National Alopecia Areata Foundation, which we call NAAF. So you'll probably hear me say NAAF. I'm a research scientist by training. Back kind of a long time ago now, I used to do basic research in the neurosciences, sort of in an academic setting. And then I took some time off from work to be a stay-at-home parent, really. And as I was thinking about where I might fit into the wide world, I found myself in the patient advocacy space, first at an organization called Sepsis Alliance. And after a few years there, I found a role at the National Alopecia Areata Foundation that was focused on research. And as somebody who came from a research background, really interested in research and development in treatment space for different diseases, it was a really good fit for me. And what I discovered almost accidentally was that I was joining NAAF at a very exciting time. I mean, alopecia areata is an autoimmune disease where people lose their hair. It's highly unpredictable. Someone might have a small patch of hair loss all the way up to having absolutely no hair on their body. NAAF has been around for 40 years as the leading patient advocacy organization for this disease. We're interested in supporting the patient community research to understand the disease better, find treatments for it, and also to educate about the disease. But it was an interesting time to join NAAF because up until 2022, there were no approved treatments for the disease. Shortly after I joined the organization late 2021, we had our first approved treatment for the disease. And in fact, we've had two additional treatment approvals since that time. So to sort of get back to where we are and how you and I met, just having treatments for this autoimmune disease is such a new space that there are a lot of questions for the patient community about how to access those treatments. And some of the work that I do now is around creating resources to help patients figure out how best to navigate that treatment access journey. And when I learned about the PAMS conference, I said, I should probably go there and learn what it looks like on the dermatology side, on the dermatology office side, and try to learn from people like you and other biologic coordinators about how we can sort of help smooth that process out for the patient community.
So NAAF has been around for 40 years.
Yes.
That is
Yeah.
amazing. What's interesting is that I feel like there really hasn't been much awareness around alopecia areata and
Yeah.
in general. And, so being able to bring that to light and creating this education is so important because there's so many patients that are probably underdiagnosed or misdiagnosed or aren't even going to the doctor because they don't know exactly what is going on.
Yeah, maybe I could talk about that a little bit. I mean, I think, it's amazing the organization has been around for 40 years and was, understood that there was kind of a need for support in this community, and that's where it started. But why don't you know more about it? Why don't we hear more about it? A lot of people don't want to talk about it. I mean, it's relatively common disease. About 2% of the population will experience alopecia areata at some point in their lifetime. That translates to about 7 million people in the US. 160 million people worldwide have this disease, but it often lives in the shadows. They don't want to let people know that they've lost their hair if they can. It's camouflaged. It impacts how they live. It has a huge psychosocial burden. People make decisions about their lives, their jobs, their works, their social life, because they are living with this disease and trying to hide it. So some of what NAAF has done in its 40-year history is provide a place for community. We have an annual patient conference. It's actually going to be our 40th annual conference in 2025. It's going to take place in June in Chicago. We recently launched, 2 years ago, launched the Walk for Alopecia, which is really about giving people a space to get out there, talk about this disease, bring it out into the public. It helps support the work that we do. It's really become quite the national movement. And in only its second year, there was about 3,000 people across the country participated. And those are only the people that registered with us. There were more people that joined in on the walks everywhere they took place. But part of our work is getting it out there. What is this disease? Yes, it's hair loss, but it is autoimmune hair loss. It has a huge psychosocial impact, impacts people's mental health. And now, thankfully, for severe disease, there are treatments. Well, because there haven't been treatments until recently, many people haven't been going to a dermatologist. It's really a new space for the disease, and part of our role is to inform the community that these treatments exist and sort of help them on that journey of going, oh, maybe this is something I should look into. So they may be going to the dermatologist's office for the first time in 5 or 10 years to learn about these treatments. And the approved treatments are JAK inhibitors, so specialty medication. So that's going to be a new space for most of these folks.
Yeah. So when we talk about alopecia areata, I wonder if people think that it only affects the hair on their head. Do you think that's a misconception?
I think possibly that's a misconception. I mean, I think first off, people get confused about the word alopecia in general. Alopecia by itself means hair loss, and there are many different kinds of hair loss. So if we talk about male or female pattern baldness, sometimes you'll hear it as androgenetic alopecia. And there are different forms of what are referred to as scarring alopecias, where the hair is not able to grow back once it's lost. Now, alopecia areata, the word areata itself means patchy. And alopecia areata, as I said, is an autoimmune disease. It's a non-scarring form of hair loss, which means there's an immune system attack on the hair follicles that prevents the hair from growing in its normal cycle. If you block that immune system attack, as you can do with intralesional corticosteroid injections, if it's a small area of hair loss, or with a JAK inhibitor, which is used for more severe disease, the hair follicle is still there and it can regrow. So probably most commonly, it appears on the scalp, but it can affect hair anywhere on the body. Some people with alopecia areata lose their eyelashes, their eyebrows. Sometimes somebody will develop the disease with just like a patch of hair missing on their legs. One of the tricky things about the disease is it's what the expression that I've heard from several doctors is the only thing predictable about alopecia areata is that it's unpredictable. So someone might have a small patch that goes away, someone might have a small patch that gets treated and goes away, or someone might have recurring patches, or someone might very rapidly lose all their hair. And there's really no way to know how the disease is going to progress for any individual. Sometimes you may hear the terms alopecia universalis, alopecia totalis. Those are more severe forms of alopecia areata, but they all fall under the same umbrella as alopecia areata.
I mean, prior to a lot of these, new medications that have been approved, these JAK inhibitors, what were some of the things that you were researching, and were there other topicals or other treatments that patients were able to utilize to help?
Sort of take that as a two-part question in NAAF's history and research. I think NAAF was and still is a leader in driving research and supporting research through its grant activities. NAAF was one of the founders of a National Alopecia Areata registry back in the early 2000s that really brought patients together with scientists and dermatologists to provide information about their disease, to provide tissue samples. And that research led to understanding of the genetic basis of the disease and the finding that alopecia areata is related to other autoimmune conditions like celiac disease, rheumatoid arthritis, type 1 diabetes. And that understanding helped point to the JAK-STAT pathway as what's underlying the inflammation that causes the hair loss, and suggested to researchers that JAK inhibitors might work as treatments for this disease. So it's sort of like a long history of promoting and supporting research that led to where we are now with these treatments. So
Mhm.
as far as how the disease has been treated all this time, intralesional corticosteroids is really like the standard of care for mild disease and patches. Beyond that, there are some treatments that didn't really come from NAAF. I don't really know exactly their history, but an understanding of causing a local immune system reaction on the scalp with something like anthralin or squaric acid. It almost causes like an irritation on the scalp, can
Mhm.
cause hair to regrow. Beyond that, people have tried other kinds of general immunosuppressants, but there is essentially very little research to support that those other kinds of treatments work, or things like squaric acid and causing those local immune reactions are painful, uncomfortable,
Mhm.
where you're basically causing itching and burning in order to cause the immune system to sort of take a break from attacking the hair follicles and causing the hair regrow, and not really practical for the time when hair does regrow. It's kind of crazy to realize that for forever, there really haven't been options for
Mhm.
people with severe hair loss. So imagine if you're getting an intralesional injection, that's also painful. But once you reach a relatively large area of hair loss, it's just not even a practical kind of treatment. So the advent of JAK inhibitors and the great clinical research that's gone into developing the drugs that we have now has been it's just an amazing breakthrough for this disease, because now we have some treatments that we know are effective, and the clinical data from the original
Mhm.
clinical trials and the long-term extension trials shows how effective they are.
And as far as like future wise, I'm sure there's ongoing research for continuing to find new treatments that are available. I'm wondering too if there's eventually going to become, biologics, injectable medications, because now
Yeah.
we're starting to see so many of that for other chronic conditions. Everything is becoming a biologic, an
Yes.
injection.
I think that you're right. And what I learned when I first joined the organization is that a lot of the leaders in the medical space sort of said to me and my colleagues, alopecia areata is in a place maybe like where psoriasis was 10 years ago, or
Mm,
whenever the first biologics were coming out for psoriasis. So there weren't a lot of treatments back then for psoriasis, and now there are many options for treatment. And that NAAF is sort of at the beginning of that trajectory
mhm,
where, okay, now we know at least one pathway that we can impact to treat the disease. There's interest from pharma companies in pursuing this. And you're right, there are a lot of ongoing clinical trials, and some of the things that are being investigated are biologics. I mean, I think we're
mhm,
still a little bit of time out to see which pathways work. But yeah, I think there's a lot of hope and anticipation that, if we have this conversation again in 10 years,
mhm,
it's going to be a different conversation, and it will be more commonplace in dermatology offices for individuals to come in and have some active hair loss, and the dermatologist will be able to say, okay, here's, this is what we think will work for you. And I should have said already that it's fabulous that we have 3 approved treatments right now. 2 are actually commercially available. One is not yet commercially available. The treatments are for severe disease. One drug, Olumiant from Eli Lilly, is for adults 18 and older. The other
mhm,
drug that's available, Litfulo from Pfizer, is for ages 12 and up. So that's the first treatment that's for adolescents. We still don't have any approved treatments for under age 12. There are clinical trials
Yeah.
going on there. So there's still a huge need in
Yeah.
the community. So as great as it is that we have the drugs that we have now, there's
Hmm.
still a long way to go to make sure that everybody can be treated.
Right. Absolutely. This episode is sponsored by Dermavant. So when you think about there's the clinical side of things and then there's the patient advocacy side, I feel like there's a few different aspects of education for patients. It's understanding the chronic condition and alopecia itself, but then also understanding the access side of how do we get access to these medications? How can we help educate them on, okay, is this something that I continue even if my hair has grown back completely? Do I have to continue this medication or can I stop it? So there's so much education that is needed. And what are some of the things that you guys are looking to do or that NAAF already does when it comes to educating on both of those things?
Yeah, that's a great question. And you're right. The availability of treatment has sort of expanded, I think, the need or the range of things that we would like to be able to share information about with the community. So we have obviously information on our website, naaf.org. We do things like we have a very robust webinar program where we share information from experts in the field about the disease. What is it? How is it diagnosed? What it might look like. And then a lot of information on these treatments, the clinical trial data that indicates that they're effective. Things like how long you have to stay on the treatment, which is essentially forever or until there are other options because this is a chronic disease, it requires chronic treatment. Understanding the disease and treatment at that level is something that we share out. But what I've been working on most recently is thinking about, as you said, sort of the patient journey of an access journey. So just imagine there's somebody who's lived with the disease for quite a while. They're learning about these treatments. Well, maybe they're going to make that trip to the dermatologist for the first time. So we have resources about, well, what to expect on that visit. What might your experience be like with the dermatologist? How is the dermatologist going to determine how severe your disease is? Because it's not necessarily just the amount of hair that's lost on your head. It's how it's
Mhm.
impacting your life can be taken into consideration. And then I think potentially one of the trickier parts for the alopecia areata community is like, okay, well, if you have that conversation with your dermatologist and it's determined that you're a good candidate for one of these JAK inhibitor medications, it's like, well, what is that going to look like for you? This
Mhm.
People with alopecia areata tend to be relatively young. I think the statistic is 80% develop the disease before age 40 and 40% before age 20. So it hits a lot of people, right in
Wow.
the prime of life, and they're otherwise healthy. So maybe they haven't
Yeah.
even been to the dermatologist. They haven't been to a doctor to discuss their alopecia areata because there hasn't been a need. So
Hmm.
here they are, and maybe they're going to find out about one of these treatments. It's not like just getting your prescription and going down to your corner CVS to get the prescription filled. So we're developing resources to sort of explain the whole process so that there's an expectation. Oh,
Hmm.
what is a specialty pharmacy? What is a pharmacy benefit manager? What does it mean when in my dermatologist's office someone comes in and says, "Oh, I'm going to sign you up for the patient access program," and really giving them the tools to be prepared for what it might take to
Hmm.
finally get that prescription. Dealing with insurance denials is a big one, and understanding, how the dermatology office is going to help you with that process. People are still getting denials for
Yeah.
these medications, saying that they're cosmetic. It's a cosmetic condition,
Yeah.
which it absolutely is not. And then, as you said, educating about what it means to take these medications, that you can't just stop the
Hmm.
medication or you will lose your hair again. So all of those things.
Yeah. And I feel like there's got to be so much education on just the quality of life aspect. These patients are dealing with so much, just the social impact. I've seen Instagram posts and different people that are dealing with alopecia areata, and they're frustrated because they're kind of getting categorized and as like, oh, you must be a cancer patient because you don't have any hair. I can't imagine what they're going through and what they're dealing with because people don't understand what it is,
Yeah,
what the condition is, and because there's not a lot of awareness around it. So really, it's not only educating patient that's actually dealing with it, but it's also educating the public.
absolutely. I think you're right. And I think that's a place where, NAF continues to work. And when we do things like the Walk for Alopecia, that's part
Mhm.
of that, just getting out there and talking about this disease in front of a larger audience, part of it. I should also say that NAF is really about making sure that people have choices. People
Mhm.
living with alopecia areata have choices. Some people choose not to treat. Some people, live with their hair loss and get empowerment from it. There are people across all ranges of severity. There are powerful spokespeople educating and talking about the impact on them. But well, I also think about the folks who really aren't talking about it because it's uncomfortable for them, or they feel like they have been made to think, well, it is just hair, and so I shouldn't be talking about it because I don't have cancer. You know,
Right. Absolutely. So, how can people get involved with NAF and for these walks? I mean, are they available in every state?
That's a great
Online?
question. The next walk for alopecia will take place in September of 2025. The first 2 years of the program, we had one major walk site that was in the San Francisco Bay Area. Our second year, 2024, we did have other organized sites, I think in 10 different locations around the country. But then there was still additional walk where
Mm.
basically if somebody said, I want to do a walk, all they had to do was gather their friends or their colleagues, whomever, and just say, okay, we're going to do it. We invite all takers to join us in this really exciting movement. Anyone who's interested can send an email to info@naaf.org or email me personally, lisa@naaf.org, and we'll connect you with the right people. And then we'll be talking more about it as we get a little bit closer.
Okay.
It's exciting to see the
Yeah.
momentum building around that event when it was just sort of an idea,
Hmm.
less than 3 years ago, to see how much growth has happened with it in the last 2 years.
Yes, absolutely. So, and then also your conference that you said is in Chicago in June. So,
Mhm.
what is that? Is that for patients or for advocates or like anybody that
It
can?
it's for the alopecia areata community, which
Okay.
means patients, family members, kids. We have a really active kids camp at the conference that's really, really popular. I mean, for some families, it's like this is where they come to see their friends year after
Hmm.
year. The conference runs from a Thursday to Sunday. It's everything from social activities to educational activities. So we'll have some of the leading dermatologists who work in the alopecia areata space there to talk about what's going on in treatment development. We have researchers there talking about, what's the outlook for alopecia areata research, not just treatment, but, understanding the disease in general. And we also have a lot of support sessions. So hearing from other people who live with alopecia areata, how they navigate the disease, maybe as they're going through their work lives, or just,
Hmm.
what is it like to be a man living with alopecia areata or a woman living with alopecia areata? So there are small group support sessions where people go together. And then there'll be a big sort of kickoff for the Walk for Alopecia at that conference. There's always a dance party that's very fun. It's been a really educational and moving experience for me to engage with the community at that level when we have those conferences.
That's awesome. I love that. So we'll make sure that there's a link for it
That would
in
be
the show
awesome.
notes. But I really appreciate you joining me and talking about this because I think it's such a important topic
Thank
to
you.
really highlight. And, the work that you guys are doing is absolutely amazing. And I really appreciate your time and sharing all of this with us. And hopefully anybody that is interested in supporting or, getting involved can check out the website and see how they can get involved in that and learn more. I think it's a great way to really help create that awareness and advocacy and support of patients that are dealing with alopecia areata. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Janelle. I really appreciate you giving me the time to talk about it and for your support of NAAF just by having this conversation.
Yes, absolutely. This episode is sponsored by Dermavant. Thanks for spending a few minutes with me and listening to That's Derm Good. You can expect new episodes of That's Derm Good every week. The podcast is available on your favorite app, including where you're listening right now. Subscribe to the podcast so you never miss a new episode. Bye.